Well, it's been a while. Hey, if Gato here. Well, I've been wanting to come back for a while now. I have many projects in the works, definitely going to come out soon. But I wanted this to be the first video of me back because of a special occasion, one that is basically 6 years in the making. I'm, of course, talking about the documentary Nobody Here, the story of Vaporwave. The Indiegogo started back in 2020. I believe it was a little bit into the pandemic, and then they dropped this on us. And as you can tell by the cassette, I was one of the people who funded it back in the day. I decided to do the $15 tier, the cassette tier, which meant you got a cassette of the companion album and also a digital copy of the movie. I don't have to go through the whole thing. If you're obviously if you're in the vaporwave community, you know that this was the elephant in the room, so to speak, for a decent amount of years. Many people thought it wasn't going to come out, and of course that caused some controversy. And it didn't help that the people who made it were very sparse in updates in their Indiegogo and in their Twitter. But now in 2026, April 20th, what a apt date to pick to release it. They decided to release it to the public. They did a special screening. I heard some vaporwave artists like Cat System Corp and Luxury Elite were there for a live screening on, I believe it was My Pleb Flamingo's Bandcamp channel. I couldn't go. I couldn't watch it because I decided to go watch Speed Racer in IMAX. It was showing in my nearby IMAX, and I decided to go to that. I couldn't miss an opportunity to go see that. So, but the reason why I also didn't go see it in the Euro premiere was because, as I mentioned, I got the cassette tier, and I had a digital copy that was promised to be sent to me. So that was coordinated. Sadly, it didn't come out on April 20th when I got it from the email. I instead got it Wednesday morning. I got it Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. That's when I received the email. And you basically got a code and you imported it into the website, and basically it cost $5, but with the code you got it for free. So what's great is that the copy is the same copy that came included with the USB cassette release. So it was 11.4 gigabytes, which is definitely going to be way higher resolution than on the Bandcamp stream version, and also on the YouTube version, because on that same day they decided to do it a full-on YouTube release. So enough of the backstory of my relationship's a weird word to say, but I mean the community's relationship with this documentary. It's finally out, and now we get to judge for ourselves if it was worth the wait. And let's get the broad opinion out of the way. Was it worth the wait? Did I like it? As a backer way back in 2020 and who was anxiously anticipating it, I didn't want this to be a scam or anything like that. Thank God it wasn't. And I thought it was great. I actually really liked it a lot. I loved it. I think it was well worth the wait. Initial thoughts going into it is that it was 2 hours long, and that was already a signifier, like, oh, thank God, we're getting something of quality, because I thought it would have sucked if this was 90 minutes or less. We're in a post-video essay era. If it was 90 minutes or less, especially with how much money it raised and the years we had to wait for it, if it was a short documentary, that would have sucked. Thankfully, no. It was 2 hours long. And what was also great is that it was so packed. It was so packed with a lot of testimonials and, of course, history, visuals, and conversations about music, about fandom, about internet culture, about vaporwave itself, obviously, but in terms of the philosophies of it and the people who founded it, from its very beginning to its spin-offs and subgenres and all that, it was a very well-paced, compact documentary. Now, it was well-paced, but there was no story. I'm not saying that as a bad thing. No, what I'm describing is usually a documentary with this type of stuff, especially music documentaries, they usually start from the very beginning. What is vaporwave to like people who are not in the know? And that is one thing I wanted to talk about, which I'll get into of like what would people outside of the community, basically people who are, you know, more into mainstream music, who probably either heard of it as a meme back in, 2016, or just never heard of it at all, what would they react to this documentary? And so this documentary was not structured for that. And it definitely has a beginning of like its origins. They name drop people like obviously Bueno Tricks for Never, aka Daniel Lobaton, who sadly is in the documentary, uh, which I'll get into of like who and who isn't in the documentary. But it definitely stems from that and then branches off into different subgenres and what it means to the obviously the original collaborators, but also to the community and to the record labels, like obviously Dream Catalog and Fortune 500 and all that stuff. So I thought throughout the whole documentary, what I found really interesting is I was I was initially expecting that. Like, how would this cater for someone who's not into the vaporwave genre? If they're completely new to it, would this be a good introduction? Would they be too lost? And that's something to think about when making a documentary about a niche subgenre or a niche internet community, something that is not mainstream that everybody knows, right? This isn't Michael Jackson. This isn't Red Hot Chili Peppers. This isn't Elvis, right? This is something that is way more niche. So, is there going to be a hand holding to get people who are completely oblivious to this subject matter and, you know, educate them? Obviously, not talking down to them, but educating them, and so they could have a worthwhile experience from beginning to end. And I feel like they 90% succeeded on that. Now, they mentioned name drops of people, artists, albums, record labels, and if you're in the know, you know who, like Midnight Television, for example. They mentioned Midnight Television. It would have been nice if they showed like the album cover of Midnight Television. Like they mentioned Beer on the Rug, but it would have been neat to like been more specific. I like it in certain segments. Uh, they would say a word, and then they would have like a dictionary, like definition in like the corner of the screen, kind of to educate not us because we know what these terms are, but to people who not in the know. And but mostly 90%, I think it succeeded. And I will say also, for a movie that is 2 hours long and the pacing is, it's not breakneck, it's very smooth, there's not a dull moment, but also the visuals back it up. I think they did a fantastic job in its editing, in its color grading, and also the CG 3D animated segments throughout it, of terms of transitions, in terms of landscapes and televisions, and like cassettes like being put into cassette players, and all the style and all of that I thought was really cool, brought so much personality into the documentary. I felt like that was so brought so much life and personality. It wasn't dull. I knew from the very beginning, when the pandemic hit, when they were making this, they definitely struggled. They were, twiddling their thumbs, trying their best to make this way more worthwhile than if they went to Zoom and interviewed these figures. They knew that would suck, and they were right. That would have sucked. But they weathered out the storm. They did in person interviews, and for like most of them, some people were like at home. They did a, Zoom like interview, like Pat Cheddington and Keith Rankin. They were, in their office when they did those interviews. But most of them, like from St. Pepsi to Christ to Donor Lens to all these artists, uh, were done in person with like creative, stylish backgrounds. It wasn't green screen. You could tell that they actually built sets to accommodate, to bring production value into this. This wasn't cheap. This, you could tell that they used our money effectively. And that was great to see. There was effort put into this and passion into this. You could tell by the end credits that, and when they were releasing the documentary, that the creators, the director, and the people who did it, made this, were very apologetic. I felt like they were anxious releasing this because they felt like, damn, this wasn't supposed to be a 6-year endeavor. But COVID hit and seeped out all of our opportunities to do it live, to do it in person, to do it the way they had to, and they had to weather the storm. There were definitely going to be some naysayers because of that, and there were. But I stuck it through, and I'm very happy that they've earned my respect. And I haven't seen the reception of this. I went into this cold, as I said. I didn't see this Monday when it premiered. I decided to wait till Wednesday, wait till I finally got the digital copy. So I know nothing of the reception from the community, or, the reception of people who aren't in the community. I would be very interested to see if they would like this more, or be confused, or feel like this is pretentious, or feel this is a bit nerdy, or how would they would think about this, not just the documentary and how it was made, but the community itself. It'd be very interesting. But I'm very happy that it came out so good, and it felt very cool to watch something that you're a part of. Because when you watch something, a documentary, like an Elvis documentary, or like a Red Hot Chili Peppers documentary, or like specific music genre documentaries, like electronic or punk rock or hip hop, rap, doesn't matter. Especially when you're someone like me, born in the generation of like the late 90s to 2000s. Obviously, there are people in the vaporwave community who are older, who are probably alive and cognizant during the 70s, 80s, 90s. But it's interesting to be part of something that you're actually a part of. This isn't a documentary where I watch is like, man, so that's what it was like to be in the roots of something back in the day. And you're watching it as someone who enjoys hip hop or punk rock or electronic music, but you weren't there in time and in space, right? So watching this documentary, because vaporwave as a genre and as a community has been created and adapted and morphed and skewed and been killed and revived on the internet, where anyone can access it. It's so cool to be a part of something like that, and to watch this, and I know what these people are talking about because I was there. Obviously, I wasn't there. In fact, I'll be upfront, I wasn't there back in 2010 or 2012 or 2014. or 2016. I got into it definitely pre-pandemic. I got into vapor way before pre-pandemic, but that's relative compared to if I saw a documentary of Elvis, right? Even if I was an Elvis fan, right? But I wasn't alive when Elvis was there. I did not see Elvis live on TV. I didn't see Michael Jackson or the Beatles live, on their first TV broadcast or when like Thriller came out, right? But I was there when these artists were up and coming, or they were already established and they would release an album, or when they were announced that they would do a tour. Or like I was there when the first Electronicon came out. That was so cool. And that's in this documentary. And they're talking about who was first there, who's the lineup, and what were the experiences like. That is so cool to watch a documentary where you are passionate and well knowledgeable on the subject. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting feeling. With that being said, that brings into the conversation of, is this going to be a puff piece? Is this going to be singing to the choir? Is this going to leave normal audience members who are not in the community cold? Or worse, is it going to be a puff piece and not say anything constructive or philosophical or critical of the community? Is it just going to be rose tinted glasses? That was one other thing that I was worried about going into the documentary. Is it just going to be a puff piece? And thankfully, it wasn't. There are segments where they actually do talk about the infamous news article talking about the anti-capitalist, post, corporate capitalist. It's a commentary, it's social commentary, political commentary. And it was so cool to watch members of the community having different opinions on it, disagreeing on that subject. It was so cool to, like, one moment someone is saying, no, we're just having fun, and then the other end someone saying, well, music and all art is inherently political, and vaporwave, what we are doing, we're basically taking copyrighted material and skewing it and releasing it for free, especially music that is way past before our time, and recontextualizing that is inherently political, especially because it is copyrighted music. And I love that. I love that there were different opinions on that. It wasn't strict on like what people can say. There was no narrative push. It let the interviewees speak their mind. And that was really cool. I like that it wasn't afraid to talk about the risk of anonymity or the lack thereof, people being exposed, being brought into the IRL after being shrouded in mystery in the URL. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Another thing that I was very appreciative of, that I was very worried going into this documentary, especially this is a documentary about vaporwave, is, oh my goodness, they better actually play the music of the genre. I hope they don't be cowards and back out and not play any of the music, because vaporwave is inherently anti-establishment, because we are getting copyrighted material, not just copyrighted music, but from movies and video games and commercials, and even not just strictly the music, visual styles, from magazines to news and newspapers and commercials and paintings and art, and morphing that for the album art. And I'm so happy to say that they did not were not afraid to release it as is, to actually let you hear the music. That would have been so lame and genuinely awful if they were afraid of copyright infringement and just said like, "Oh, there's this song. Imagine how it was like." That would have sucked. That would have absolutely sucked. Uh, it was great to actually hear the music that they were talking about, and I appreciated one other aspect, talking about the aspect of concept albums. One of the interviewees mentioned that concept albums were initially a thing in prog rock and have basically been absent for years, and then vaporwave kind of picked that up. And of course they mentioned one of the best, I mean, in my opinion, the best concept album that vaporwave has given us, News at 11, and gave it its own little segment. I'm very happy that the prevailing opinion that vaporwave is just fun wasn't the only thing that they talked about. Vaporwave can be fun. It could be a party jam, but it could also be retrospective. It could be thought provoking. It could be disturbing and make you cognizant of not only the past, but of the present, of the now. And mentioning albums like, obviously, the group 2814, and, obviously, News at 11 and Death Dynamic Shroud. It was really cool to explore all facets of Vaporwave. If I were to mention any criticisms of the documentary, I honestly don't have any. Well, only nitpicks. For one, my boys. Where was James and Tech? They were not interviewed in it. Keith was there. That was cool. But everybody, obviously, the major players. I mentioned that One of Tricks Never is not in the documentary, but it makes sense. Like, he's so big. He's the godfather, and definitely he was a foundational member and released Echo Jams. But it wasn't mandatory to have him. Although it was sad to not have Vectroid in the documentary. But certain artists, other than those two that I mentioned, were not there. Like my boys, like I wish they could have gone more in depth with Death Dynamic Shroud. Their contribution to the genre and to music in general should not be understated. I'll Try Living Like This is one of the best albums in the 21st century. There, I said it. So, but other than that, I don't have any flaws. I think it came out great visually, sound design wise. They went above and beyond on the style without lacking any substance. There is substance here. It's very intellectual, without, also great not to have a narrator. They trusted the interviewees to bring you into this journey with having a clear structure without having like, well, this is the beginning and this is the. No, there was no uh, obnoxious or uh, distracting narrator or clear structure that felt like a movie. It felt like an experience. And that made this a lot more interesting than a typical documentary. And I also liked that they had that beautiful little tribute at the end credits mentioning the people in the community that we have lost. I'm happy that they decided to bring that little part there, because those are no small people in the community. They were also pretty substantial in the scene. And I'm very happy they did that. I will also say I was not expecting this, because I mentioned I did the cassette tier. So I got the cassette and the digital download. Now, memory may not be that strong because I do not remember my tier mentioning that my name would be in the credits. So when they in the end credits, they have the list of backers from the initial Indiegogo campaign. And I'm like, oh yeah, if I did a higher tier, I would have been on that. But I was watching it and I decided to pause it because you never know. And to my surprise, my name is in the end credits because I was a bit sad. I was like, damn, I should have done the higher tier to do that. Yet again, I could be misremembering. Maybe it was in my tier and I didn't read the fine print. But yeah, my name is there. I'm not going to tell you my name. This is before I went by Gato on the internet. So, but seeing it there, it's like, oh wow, I'm now part of this history. I actively contributed to this. This is so cool. I think that's all my thoughts. I think that's all my thoughts on this documentary. Very happy that they didn't skimp out on including actual music from the genre. And also the original compositions of the music were great. They were of quality and they weaved perfectly with the songs, with the vaporwave songs. Obviously, if you're well into the genre, you know which songs are original soundtrack of this documentary and songs from other albums. But it weaved so perfectly that it wasn't distracting to say like, what is this? This sounds like temp music. This sounds like copyright free music. No, it felt right at home with the aesthetics established in the documentary. So that was great. And other than that, I think that's all I got to say. 6 years in the making. I'm very happy we finally got it. I got the digital copy. Part of me now wishes I could have the DVD copy in my collection, but I think that's past that time. I can't wait to share it with my friends and see what they think. And I'm also very happy to be back. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'm definitely back. I have some, like this album, for example, that's from Geometric Lullaby. I've been waiting for that album for, oh my god, probably mid last year or early last year. I don't remember. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. And I also have some cassettes that I bought that I should open and other video projects that I have in the making. But other than that, I'm Gato. Peace out.